Let us at this point get in our teeth into that discussion with Professor Abiodun Adeniyi on the return of Bola Tinubu and how he may likely set about dealing with the big elephant in the room, namely the crisis over the composition of the All Progressives Congress Presidential Campaign Council. Good morning, Prof. Great to have you.
Yeah, good morning, Steve, and good morning, Abby.
Good morning.
Pleasure being here.
Sevia, thank you so much. Well, I mean, the topic is the return of the APC presidential candidate, Asiwaju Bola Tinubu. But you know that once you start to discuss Asiwaju Tinubu, there are a number of issues. His health and the manner in which the communication around it is being dealt with, comes to the fore. He has returned to Nigeria after 12 days abroad. Nobody is categorically sure if his 2 week abroad was entirely on a medical mission. What do you make of the fact that every time that Asiwaju sort of travels and people are expecting him, there are speculations. And then what you get is that, oh, he's fine. Look at his pictures, look at the videos. Some of them might turn out to be old videos. Do you think that the manner in which the Asiwaju health issue is being communicated is helpful to his cause now that he's here to start the campaigns on full throttle?
All right. Thank you, Steve. But what I make of it is this. I do know that from the time that the APC won the presidential election in 2015, the attention on Asiwaju increased, somewhat, because I think speculation started growing that if somebody could be that instrumental, to the ascension of another person as the president of this country, then we should rightly begin to focus on him, that at some point he might also be interested, So from then on, you discover that whatever he does is often a subject of interest. And of course, it started growing and got to a crescendo somewhat, towards as the administration of President Buhari started coasting home. And it's not surprising, really, if this attention is even getting to the high heavens, because he remains a possible, among the three categories of presidential aspirants, the possible, the probable, and maybe the aspirational, as the case could be. It's a possible, so it's legitimate for citizens to be concerned about what he does or what he does not do, because against the background of recent occurrences in this country, where we had a president dying as a quinquagenarian, and we have another one, a septuagenarian, having to deal with his health, it became even more concerning for us to beam our searchlight. But having said that, I think that I want to imagine that sometimes we even overemphasize it, because looking at him, really, we are not ordinarily people can just visualize the health condition of somebody by merely looking at him. But of course, from public record, we know that if he has any problem at all, they are largely orthopedic, they are hardly endocrinological, and of course, maybe they are not things that has to do with end-time organs, maybe liver, kidney, and the heart, And of course, if those ones are eliminated, I think it's okay for us to see that any human being, the average human being above 40, can probably manage his health well. But again, who are we to begin to be judgmental about the health of another person? It is often said that once you are above 50, you have one health condition to deal with or the other. And of course, nobody knows when the end time will be. It's not by might, it's not by spirit. It's not by might or by power, but by the spirit. So says the books. So we can't really tell. But I think that Asiwaju is increasingly interesting to us, because of the seeming opacity around the management of his information. Not that he doesn't have very capable hands Of course, we know that he's one of the best headhunters in this country, and he has assembled some media legends, information management legends, in this country. People who you will say that if you want to write the history of the evolution of this country, of journalism in this country, you cannot leave out their names. They've been very influential and effective and productive in the growth of journalism in this country, and they have mentored so many generations of journalists. We have them around Asiwaju, but of course it goes beyond that. Sometimes only people that you delegate power to can only do just a bit. So sometimes you want to hear from the principal, from the anecdotal horse's mouth, and that's what I think it's not coming forth from Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, as the case could be. So I think he should get the monkey off his back, the monkey of public speaking. He should get that off his back, and dissolve the controversies around his health. Otherwise, it shouldn't be something that should bother us. Life is in the hands of God, and of course, we see him moving around. So for somebody who is 70, how much fitness do we expect of him? In modern times, how many of us, I said by the grace of God, I is sure that you can get to 70, except by the grace of God, like I said once again, going by some of the vicissitudes of life. So if you can make 70, even biblical 70 is salutary, 3 scores and 10 is salutary. And if you can make it, of course, God has been very kind to you. But in a situation where you're asking for the leadership mantle of a country as humongous as Nigeria, as complicated, complex, as with so much promise as Nigeria, of course, you should expect, you should expect proper critical examination, like he's going through now. But to deal with it, I think I think he should be much more engaged in it, not through the prism of his lieutenants who are very, very capable. Remember, I said this, but maybe by himself, and of course. There's nothing wrong, really, if he produces his medical certificate. There's nothing wrong with that. We do not expect him to be perfect. I mean, it's just coming against the grain of fears that he's not going to ever do that. And if he does that, of course, we will all salute him and judge him by how he is. Even the Holy Book once again say, come to me as you are. Let him come to the citizenry, to the voters, the way he is, and we can appreciate him on the basis of that. And of course, you may be surprised that might even end up giving him more support, more sympathy, and people might at the end of the day vote for him much more than he's even expecting. So that's what I think, really, with respect to this. Yes, he's back. Very, very gratifying, because there were concerns, anxieties when he wasn't around, and do not forget what could happen. God forbid if anything had happened to him, or if all fears in some circles had been confirmed. Of course, it will create some kind of crisis, internal party crisis, processes that could even affect the entire electoral process. There will have been disturbance. So that's why we always wish him well. But in wishing him well, we just also want him to come clean, to talk to us more, not through delegation, but for us hearing his voice, the sound of his voice on these critical subject areas, as the case could be, Steve.
Professor Adeniyi, just so we understand you correctly, are you saying that there's very little legitimacy to the concerns around Bola Tinubu's age and health issues in specific relation to running for the highest seat of power in Nigeria? Public speaking, as you alluded to earlier, is a core prerequisite for a presidential role, as we'll all agree. So let's get you very clearly. What's your position on this?
Yeah. Public speaking, it's not a constitutional requirement. It's probably just ethical, something that you call expectation. And of course, expectations can be managed, and that's one. Then secondly, public speaking is something that you can learn, and it's something that you can also, it can also be biological. You could be a talented speaker, and you can also grow becoming a good public speaker through learning. So all these things are optional, but it's not a major requirement that determines success in life. But in political process, political campaign, it can be very, very helpful. Some of the greatest orators in the world, both in the past and present, have grown on to become wonderful leaders, because you also need the power of oratory, the power of communication to convince people, to assuage, to woo people whose minds are permanently in the state of tabula rasa, whether young or old. It helps in motivation. And of course, minds can be feeble, they can be fragile. but you coming to them, feeding those minds through your convictions, your persuasions can be very helpful in making them to believe in you. So it can help, but it's not just it's not just the entire thing. Obama probably rose to become president of America because of his rhetorical prowess, largely. But Donald Trump is less of an orator. But of course he also became president of the United States. So it's not the be-all and end-all, but it can help. So we may not situate Bola Tinubu in the bracket of an excellent public speaker, but it doesn't matter. He has excelled in other areas. Those ones can actually also be complementary. But the argument here is that whether you are eloquent or not eloquent, whether you want to learn it, or whether you are a naturally gifted public speaker, the argument here is that you just have to communicate. And communicate is just basic. Provide information. Let us hear from you and come as you are. And of course, we'll make up our mind, we'll process the information you are disseminating, get educated, become more aware of a person, you become more informed, and probably even become more convinced about your ability to pull us through the doldrum and take us to the next level. Do not forget that we also have a president, a current president, who is also slightly reticent. Maybe deliberately so. Yes, it might be helpful in communication because silence is also communication. But in our kind of system, too much silence can bring about suspicion. Is that what we need now when we need our system to be oxygenated with information? Probably that's not what we need, because even the economy relies on communication, constant information, so that you can build confidence, and attract investment, whether local or foreign. Assurances come through the exchange of meaning, which is implied in communication. So the average leader should be able to express himself marginally, basically, and share understanding. So understanding will bring about appreciation. That's the argument here, Abi. And I think so. That's the argument I'm actually making.
All right, Prof. But how do you think that the campaign for the APC will proceed now that Asiwaju Bola Tinubu is back? You are aware, of course, that there are issues around the composition of the Presidential Campaign Council, so much so that the public was told that the chairman of the party issued a letter, but then it looks like he withdrew the letter after a while, basically complaining about the fact that the PCC didn't conform to the agreement had with the party. We know that there are issues, however, albeit silent, between Asiwaju Bola Tinubu, and the chairman, Senator Adamu, who obviously was not a big fan of Asiwaju during the primaries. How do you think that this might affect cohesion, and proper planning moving forward? Don't forget the fact that there are a number of other people who contested, who vied for the same ticket with Asiwaju. The Vice President, Yemi Osinbajo, for example, is not on the PCC. An explanation was offered that he had to stay back in government. We see that the body language of others, like even Rotimi Amechi, is very lukewarm. There are insinuations that there are a number of northern governors who, as a matter of fact, might be working for the PDP. How do you think that Asiwaju and his own camp of the APC will proceed, given the fact that he probably still does not have everybody on board yet?
Well, Steve, I think we're just witnessing political process that can be very convoluted. It can be very shifty. Positions move every day, every hour, and speculations will also continue, which probably informed your question. And of course, we have read in the media how there are disagreements in the constitution of the governing of the campaign council. This is not unexpected when you are having 600, 700 people. But if you look at those lists in the first instance, how many of them can be very, very effective, other than just symbolic, strategic recognition of their passings as members of campaign council? I mean, that's where you see the evidence of what Pareto told us about 10 to 20% rule in an organization. Yes, you have a motley crowd in an organization, but at the end of the day, only just a few will be pivotal in the running of the affairs of that organization. It's going to be more evident. It's often more evident in the political environment where everything is just fluid. It's more about prerogative, about connection, who you know, and how influential that person will know to get you involved in one role or the other. That's what is going to find. And you continue to see these quarrels, these agitations, this crisis of confidence amongst them. But oftentimes what defines them, what helps them, is the greater goal, how well they are focused on the bigger picture, which is winning the presidential election, as the case could be. In the case of APC, where Bola Tinubu is a candidate, I think it will be the party will be heavily reliant on its famed sophistry, in political calculation and in the arithmetics of politics. They will just continue to rely on him to be able to propel them, to where they want to get to, probably, if depending on how the Labour Party, the PDP, or any other party for that matter, permit them to so do. So I just believe that the speculations will continue, the agitations will continue. The push for involvement and for integration will also continue. But overall, it's not the first time we're going to see it. It's not also going to be the last time, but it will continue until they get to the end of the road. In this case, until the presidential election. And of course, there are these speculations, like you rightly mentioned, about the position of the governors. I think that the Northern APC governor, they were very courageous, very convinced when they took that decision that the presidential position to move to the south. Of course, they've been saluted in different circles. And of course, it will only be just a matter of honor, really, whatever they do next. But do not forget, again, that politics is not about, it's often about about personal interest, especially in our own climate, where people privilege personal interest above the interest of the collective. And things might change depending on how projected calculations, how calculations will favor them or do not favor them. But it might be difficult for us to place a hand on it. And of course, I would want to also go by the explanation of the chairman of the party that yes, he is a human being. He probably had his preference, for the position of the party candidacy. But of course, at the convention produced a different result. And the onus is now on him, to toe the line of the majority, the line of the party, which is Asiwaju. So what happens in the past should not matter. And I heard him said he has done his best. He will continue to do his best. Whatever else anyone thinks about him is not within his own hands. All he can do is to do his best. And maybe overall, we'll just continue to watch and hope for the best, because APC is an aristocratic party, just like PDP and maybe to some extent Labour Party, aristocratic in the sense of their being hegemons, some of the biggest parties. So these parties are parties that are instrumental, factors in the development of our democracy, in the success or failure of the next general elections, and our interest in them as observers will continue to be keen. But what we can only hope is that they will give us the best, be very good contestants, in an election that will once more determine the fate of this country as an evolving democracy.
All right, Prof. Adeniyi. So do you foresee a peaceful process as we approach a long campaign season? Of course, we are aware of internal wranglings with the hegemons, as you put it, which is a major concern to even the electorate. And they constitute the biggest voice in this process. What is your overall realistic general outlook?
Okay, I had the first part of your question, if I foresee a peaceful process.
Yes, please.
If that's all you asked, then I can proceed to answer.
Especially over a long campaign season.
I'm very hopeful. Yeah, okay. I'm very hopeful that the elections will go well. Because even the insecurity that we fear, yes, there are still concerns around corners, but it's gradually declining. At a time, even those of us, there were concerns for those of us in Abuja. And I remember Steve once asked me if I feel safe staying in Abuja. And that was because of the incessant attacks, the closeness of the threats, even to the seat of power. But now, those fears, are fizzling out. We now have the remaining hostages released, even though we're still concerned about whether they were rescued or released. At the end of the day, we should just be happy that, of course, they are just out in the first instance, realizing that in warfare, the means can be either kinetic or non-kinetic. In this instance, we can just say that they were released using non-kinetic powers, soft power, not hard power, not precision, But in this case, once again, it's just about the result. The result is that they are out of that place, and we are no longer feeling as if we were the ones that were kidnapped. Because if you have your fellow citizen, held hostage, you also feel insecure. You also feel somehow that you are under hostage, consistent with the sense of community, which Benedict Anderson told us ages ago, the great anthropologist that is, told us ages ago. But now that they are free, you also have a sense of freedom. And that's what we expect of military forces. Well, we want to commend them for this development. And of course, going forward, gradually into the election, we expect greater sense of security. And the president also acknowledged that he has provided everything possible, resources and munitions for the security agencies, to be top-notch in the fight against insecurity, orchestrated by terrorists, bandits and kidnappers all over the place. So we just expect that, when the elections proper come, the flashpoints of insecurity, the northeast, sections of the northwest, the southeast, I think practically everywhere, really. There's nowhere you can actually say is secure in this country now. We just expect that our security agencies, God will continue to empower them, and of course, with more determination, greater zeal, higher sense of patriotism, and the support of the citizenry, most importantly, that they will be able to pull through things and give us a peaceful, free, fair, and credible election. Of course, with INEC on the throttle. Thank you.
All right, Prof, let's, discuss a bit of some meat now as we are, rounding off. And that's to touch on the expected manifesto of the party and that of the candidate as the campaigns are about to start, fully. A lot of people are of the opinion that it is unlikely that there will be a radical departure from the manifesto that brought APC into power, from what President Muhammadu Buhari's administration has been doing, because Asiwaju Bola Tinubu will necessarily need to campaign on some positive areas of this government. But then there are three key areas that a lot of people, it looks like they will be waiting for to see what Asiwaju will do in his campaign manifesto. First will be how he intends to tackle the issue of ASU. If you remember, there has been a video from the 2015 campaign where Asiwaju led the campaign and he said categorically on the podium in Lagos that not only will APC government, if voted into power, will stop incessant ASU strike, but that they will make sure that a 4-year course remains a 4-year course, and that there will be student loans to students that will be given. Of course, no student loans has been given, and we are all witnesses to the fact that this is the 8th month of the ASU strike, and the only thing that the government is trying to do now is to use the instrumentality of the law through the courts on the one hand, and then to approve two other unions in order to whittle down the powers of ASU. What do you think that an Asiwaju will do with ASU? That's one. The second area that people are interested in will be the area of deregulation of the oil sector. President Buhari has said that he will put an end into subsidies by June next year, but he will be out of government. So therefore, what it means is that the first major thing that Asiwaju will do if he becomes president will be to remove subsidies. Do you think that he will be bound by this kind of, interesting thing that Buhari is pushing to him, which he's not able to do for 8 years? And lastly, do you think that Asiwaju will have a definite stance on the issue of anti-corruption? Do you think that is a subject that will feature at all in his manifesto? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Steve, for that cocktail of questions. But first, let me just say that the quality of success or the condition of success in governance is often a function of the quality of leadership. And that's why every argument, there's practically no Nigeria that is not conversant with the problems of this country. No matter how analytical you are, at the end of the day, you end up, at the doorstep of leadership. Just like every story will end with the tortoise, as the case could be. And of course, that's our situation, no doubt. And you discover that sometimes when a leader comes up and he rises above divides, he's not chronic. He doesn't consider people who are closest to him in considerations for offices. He privileges merit, technocracy, over knowledge, or over friendship or filial relationship. That leader is more likely to succeed. It's not emotional, it's not sentimental about choices or positions of personnel into office. Those things can be very, very helpful. And of course, leadership does not mean excellence or expertise in all sections of the system. It's simply about other-centered relationship, other-centered behavior, relationship that is sacrificial, geared towards helping others, towards the community, not about yourself. So the more a leader is able to do this, the more success is able to register in all areas, against the background of the fact that, all areas are properly manned, with quality hands working in the interest of the system, and realizing that, they have to report to you. And of course, you are not going to suffer a fools gladly if they misbehave. So we are expecting that maybe the next person that will lead, maybe Asiwaju or Atiku or Obi, as the case could be, will just prioritize excellence, technocrats, with privileged technocrats over people who are probably inadequate in positions, So that could help in inspiring the citizenry, galvanizing the populace towards doing the right things, that will make all of that indices that you mentioned to add up, So having said, I think the other area is, maybe the one I can remember, is corruption, where there are doubts whether he'll be able to confront corruption headlong, because, of course, there have been allegations around the source of wealth. Again, that's an area that people will say is slightly opaque. One reasonable explanation I've had is that, he has heavy investment in stocks. And of course, stocks can hardly, they are maybe not physical things, but it can also be very, very productive, rewarding for the investor. Because against that background, people just believe that maybe he must have circumvented processes and procedures and probably still doing it, to be able to be where he is in terms of wealth. Again, suspicion. But this man, I'm not aware that he has been convicted by any court. Code of conduct called him at a time, and of course he was freed. I'm not sure he's been investigated by the anti-corruption agencies, ICPC, EFCC. To the extent that all these things, are there, and because we still have all our anti-corruption agencies still working, and they are still going to continue to work, maybe when he ascends power, if he wins, I don't think that he will be frontally against these agencies. So anti-corruption fight will still continue, but how well will the fight be? Will it be as it was under Obasanjo when Nuhu Ribadu held sway? And of course, with Gusto, we saw how he fought it. I'm not sure if any other chairman, maybe we're still looking at the young man who is presently there, if any other EFC chairman has surpassed his records in terms of how he was able to conscientize, galvanize the populace against the malaise of anti-corruption, where people just think that Nigeria does not belong to anybody. And what you have to do is just to pilfer it. And for those who are pilfering, you continue to criticize them, and you are just waiting to also get there to take your turn at pilfering and plundering the country. Past leaders have become barracudas, and of course, you are only thinking that you are probably even quietly envying them, hoping to take your turn, because you just see that country as a virgin country that is not worth anything other than to being plundered, So that's the unfortunate value system that we are in. Definitely we need a strong leader who will change this value system through the frenetic, the determined fight against corruption, encouraging transparency, enhancing accountability. We need them, no doubt, and I don't think that he will come and be against the anti-corruption fight. The minimum we can get from him is to continue the fight. Whether at the level of the status quo or to increase, campaigns against corruption. But overall, we just have to wait and see. But again, it likely depends again on what the citizens want, how the citizens push, how the agenda will set before them. We also have a role to play, the office of the citizens, like Dr. Obio Sekwesile will call it, has a role. They have a role to play in this matrix. If we are docile, of course, they will take us for being Lilliputs. But if we are active, of course, they will take us for being action-oriented. And of course, we can propel them, or we can propel him or any other person to work harder for a common good, as the case could be. Steve?
All right.
I think there's another question around subsidy, yes.
We won't be able to take that.
Maybe
it's okay, Prof.
Projected that in June subsidy will be removed. Again, there may not be anything to fear. The arguments arrive in circles, very fertile in circles, that we can remove it, so that we can have the market determine the price of PMS, just like we see in some other West African countries and in other parts of the world. Petrol is said to be cheapest in Nigeria.
Prof. Adeniyi,
unfortunately, that we are borrowing.
Unfortunately, Prof. Adeniyi, we cannot get to the end of that thought, but always an absolute pleasure to have you here with us. Thank you.